Mitch, I thought it was very average. It was like passable.
Yeah.
Like, okay, you're up there. There's people that were worse. Like, I've seen worse.
Yeah.
Oh, what's worse was Robert De Niro. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, we can also make fun of, like, we'll just take the win, you know. Did he get slapped on stage like Chris Rock? You know, I'll take the win where we can take the win. Why you can be critical, and I appreciate Marc being honest and being critical, but like a lot of people are being mean spirited, like in the comments, right? And I'm like, yo, like if this was the Olympics, he's on the podium. He made his performance not gold or silver, but he got bronze. He's on the podium, so take the win, you know. Hey, what's up, guys? So I'm coming you guys with another video here on doing a Zoom format with some of my friends. We're going to be talking about Jo Koy and his hosting at the Golden Globes. So we're going to have this talk about the aftermath and everything that was going on with that. There's a lot of discussion about like the Filipino community and Filipinos entertainment in general, and maybe some toxic Filipinos. So we're going to have some fun. So with all of that said, if you're new to this channel, what is up? My name is Mitch, Maverick Mitch. Hey, Mitch, all the Mitches, the call sign Don, and pretty much I like talking about what I talking about. So, politics, pop culture, and everything between. Be sure to check out all those videos as you're finishing this video, and hit that like, share, and subscribe as it feeds the algorithm. So, joining me today is some friends from the PHLV Open Forum show. So, I have today Marc Ang. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Marc Ang. Mitch and I talk every week along with Rachel on Open Forum, which is a PHLV every Monday at 6 p.m. and focus mostly on Las Vegas political issues led by Tita Josie Harrison, who is Jo Koy's mom. So I'm super excited here to talk about something that's very relevant. It's a cultural moment. So after intros, I'm excited to get right to it. Thank you, Mitch, for having me.
Thanks, Ang. Rachel, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I moved from Southern California to Vegas about, 7 years ago. I'm involved in local politics, and I like just talking about politics and social commentary, everything in between. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel. And again, I kind of also want to open up with that little disclaimer, especially for those who are just first watching us in this and in my channel, is that we actually know Jo Koy in second degree through his mom, Tita Josie, in which we all not only work with on PHLV radio, but like we all been to her birthday parties, Christmas parties. We've been to her house multiple times, and so we definitely have kind of like some skin in the game and everything. And I've been somewhat critical, especially when it comes to Jo Koy, especially when his movie came out. But it's never been mean spirited. I think it comes from a constructive criticism point where I want us as a Filipino community to be better, right? And this kind of conversation goes there, but I'm more on the defense because I've been seeing a lot of people being a little bit more hateful, or like the whole crab mentality that was going in there. But before we set up all of that, I think Rachel, you were at Tita Josie's for the screening. Personally, I just saw his monologue, and I also saw other people's discussion, like Whoopi Goldberg, Howard Stern's, and their take on Jo Koy's performance. So I'll start it off with Rachel. How did you feel like Jo Koy did at the Golden Globes?
Well, to be honest, I got there late, but little did I know that Tita Josie, they said that they missed the opening monologue, so we didn't see the beginning. It's the first time I think a lot of us have ever watched any of these award shows. It's my first time. I didn't realize how many commercials there were. I didn't realize how much he didn't really talk. I thought, the host would do a little more, but we missed the opening monologue, but they showed the rebroadcast right after. So Tita kind of missed the beginning of that, but she saw most of it. So we wanted to see how he did in the opening monologue. I thought he did okay for his first time. But like you were saying, we were just super proud of him. His mom's watching, and we were just, like, oh, there he is, every time he popped up. And we were just waiting for him to, talk about his mom, or, say what have you. But I didn't, I haven't looked at too much online of what was said. There's a guy that I do follow on YouTube, Marc, and he's kind of up there on YouTube, and but he was kind of critical about him. I think for us, well, with open forum, most of us were there. We were just talking about the other things that were going on, with the commercials and the hosts, and we're like, oh, are they pandering to the Asians because Jo Koy's there? Is that why? I entered when I started watching when Steven Yeun won. So we're like, oh, they're just giving it to the Asians now or something. So we were wondering if that was going on. But as far as his monologue, thought it was okay. I thought he would be playing it pretty safe because he's new. And he probably wants to be asked back. For the most part, we were just super proud that we were commenting on everything else that was going on in background, but that's about it.
Yeah,
I wish you guys were there.
Yeah, I saw the monologue myself, and I think it was just fine. I think it wasn't anything amazing. I think he was just fine. I think Whoopi Goldberg puts a good, and the View. I disagree with them many times, but in this instance, I think they put a good point. Like, he didn't have a whole lot of time to prepare, right?
But for the first time, stand-up comedian Jo Koy took on the hosting duties, and it was a rough room for him. Take a look.
Oppenheimer is based on a 721-page Pulitzer Prize-winning book about the Manhattan Project. And Barbie is on a plastic doll with big boobies. Oh, I got the gig 10 days ago. You want a perfect monologue? Yo, shut up. You're kidding me, right? Slow down. I wrote some of these, and they're the ones you're laughing at.
This is what I'll tell you. These gigs, these hosting gigs, are brutal.
Yeah.
They're just brutal. If you don't know the room, if you've not been in these rooms before and you're sort of thrust out there, it's hit or miss. Now, I love Jo Koy. He, to me, makes me just crazy because he's funny. I don't know whether it was the room. I don't know whether it was the jokes. I didn't get to see it. But I do know that he is as good as it gets when it comes to stand-ups.
Yeah,
and it is not an easy gig. I mean, if you read...
He was only notified 10 days, and then even Whoopi Goldberg said, like, the Golden Globes were on last night, if you even watch. I mean, no one's even kind of like watching the Golden Globes anymore anyway, so it's kind of like she also, like, even Whoopi kind of gave a little dig to the Golden Globes. My point is, like, again, like, he was there, he only got notified 10 days, and the only reason, and other Filipinos, even my friends, like, he was the host. Like, I mean, to be fair, because we have mutuals with Tita Josie, we saw everyone post it on Facebook, right? At least on my wall, all I saw was, and especially through other Filipino groups, SoCal Filipinos and all this stuff, like, hey, it's Jo Koy, it's gonna be the first Filipino hosting the Golden Globes and all that stuff, right? And so, in that instance, and I know Marc is going to be a little bit more critical, and I'll let him pass on, but I look at it as a win, okay? Because now I'm going in the defensive just because I'm seeing a lot of Filipinos in these comment sections being a lot like, oh, he bombed, he did the worst. I think he just did maybe okay. It's not like the best performance, but I think he did okay. And Marc will go into it. He probably looks a little bit nervous. I mean, Jo Koy up there. And so, I kind of agree with that. And I think it's because of the level of, like, caliber of what he's dealing with type of thing. And so, I'll let Marc continue, and then I'll jump in my thoughts back into the comment section of what some Filipinos were talking about.
I appreciate it, Mitch. I really kind of pretty much stand where you stand. First of all, let's look at the bigger macro picture, and then we'll hone in on kind of some of my takeaways from this. The first is something that Rachel mentioned, which is very poignant, is the fact that even in the commercials and even some of the awards that were won, you're starting to see more Asians represented. This was a problem for a long time, but what happened is our generation rose up, and this Asian generation is in the forefront of advertisers now, because advertisers want Asians to spend money. right? So ultimately, it comes down to that, and the culture is meeting that moment of embracing Asians in a similar way that Hispanics got their moment back in the early 2000s and maybe late 90s. It's kind of the same thing here, and our purchasing power is becoming bigger and bigger. And even though we have less people than Hispanics or blacks, we're actually Asians are rising as a bigger economic force. So that is actually to be expected. And also the reason why Jo Koy was probably picked. The last minute thing, though, bothers me. And Joe did reference that when he was, on stage. And I think that was very important to reference. And I don't think it's a cop out because I think that if you really, I mean, everything else was planned to the T and had been set for months, on the schedule. And suddenly, like 10 days, who dropped out, right? Who was Joe replacing? And that kind of bothered me. It's almost like, okay, they're going to throw us a crumb there. And so that is another finer point that I wanted to kind of bring up is uh, why was this an afterthought? If he is the biggest, like one of the biggest, like Asian Filipino rising stars, why was this he not planned to do this months before? Okay, so that's interesting there. And of course, I'm not trying, you know me, I'm pretty straightforward. I'm not trying to also to cop out here, but I agree with Whoopi Goldberg. I agree with Mitch. I agree that when you're given like just a few days to prep, you don't have the luxury of the time for the subconscious brain and the creativity of the brain to come up with the best things. And especially when someone's feeding you the jokes, and he even said some of these jokes aren't mine. But let's get now to the actual performance. And I think I'm going to be a little more critical here now. The other side of it is, Joe, why do you accept this? Joe,
Right.
why aren't you, negotiating from a position of strength? Joe's appeal, and I've been a Jo Koy fan since the OG days, pretty much, when he did his Tupperware commercials, and stuff like that that was so creative. But like that was said earlier, it's niche. Joe's audience. Joe's audience is not just Filipino Americans or Asian Americans. Joe's audience is also Angelinos, SoCal, Hispanics. I mean, people that understand Filipino culture, grew up with Filipinos, interact with Filipinos, love him because he spoke to what was real and he really connected with people beyond the niche. And there was a spirit of that, bringing his mom in. It just was so proud. And I think as Filipinos, it's like, wow, this guy's really owning it. How cool is that, right? And that was his appeal. When I saw Easter Sunday, I was disappointed. I thought that completely was lacking in the pride and the organic nature of his rise and what made him famous to start with. I'll be honest with you. I thought that was stunted. That a lot of Hollywood people came in and got their fingerprints on it and mangled it into a Frankenstein of not really funny. I saw elements of that in his monologue and his hosting. I feel that he has become more of a person that is trying to please the Hollywood elite than he is on owning what made him famous and loved by we the people. So I think that is my biggest criticism in the way it played out. Yet, I will tell you that I think the backlash is an opportunity because even though I recognize, it was like you said, Mitch, I thought it was very average. It was like passable.
Yeah.
Like, okay, you're up there. There's people that were worse. Like I've seen worse.
Yeah.
Oh, what's worse was Robert De Niro. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, we can also make fun of like we'll just take the win, Did he get slapped on stage like Chris Rock? I'll take the win where we can take the win. And I think what's also is a good note here is like Whoopi Goldberg mentioned it, and you kind of mentioned it in a different way, is that he's working a different crowd than he normally does, right? Like normally Jo Koy works a crowd in which people know him, they come to his shows, so he really works on that instead of the Hollywood elites, in which I don't necessarily think that he's a part of. So it's a different crowd, right? And again, even though Jo Koy does stand up and comedy, that not necessarily mean you can be a host of a show, right? There's a lot of overlap for sure. Just as much as people think just because I do podcasts and I do a lot of public speaking, I can host MC a gala event. Like, no, like that's a different ball game for me, right? And so
do you expect your electrician to be a plumber?
Yeah.
Also, right? It's kind of like that, right? Like you said, there's some overlap in skills, but yeah, you just throw that guy in. It really goes to show bad planning on the producer side as well. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah,
I agree with you, man.
And again, like just because it sets, like you were mentioning, it sets him up in a bad way where he only has 10 days. Howard Stern mentioned this in his podcast that like when Jimmy Kimmel gets nominated or whatever, does these shows, he has at least 6 months to prepare.
I think Jo Koy got the gig 10 days before the Golden Globes because nobody
I read that he said that, and I was like, well, that's weird.
Nobody wanted to host this thing. A bunch of high-profile comedians reportedly turned down the gig, including Chris Rock. Finally, everyone's getting smart. Those shows are fucking difficult to do. You know,
Which
and if you
Jo Koy apparently found out.
The guy should have come out and talked about the fact that they chose him 10 days ago because no one else in Hollywood wanted the fucking gig. And then work from there. That's the premise I would have gone with and said, no wonder no one wants this gig. Can't make fun of anybody anymore. I felt bad for the dude because 10 days, because I've talked to Jimmy about this, and he does such a great job with the with the Academy Awards. He prepares for like 6 months. I mean, he's got a whole, and Molly is the executive producer. I mean, they work their asses off on that thing. 10 days.
Yeah.
You're doomed.
For his stuff, right? And so this whole Golden Globes type of thing, and I'm gonna give credit to Jo Koy, like he had only had 10 days to watch like whatever movies and TV shows that was on the list. So like if you're not in that realm of watching like me who binge watches Strange New Worlds or Jack Reacher or whatever, you have to do a lot of catch up, right? And so your material, not only do you have to watch it, you have to build the material. So I'm gonna give credit also in that point. And my thing is, and going back now, this is kind of like segueing to like we're toxic Filipinos and all this stuff. And like I see a lot of the comments again, they're not just giving him credit, they're saying that he's bomb. Like and it's also subjective, right? Like if comedy doesn't like hit you, I get it. Like it just doesn't hit, right? But my thing is, and this is what I'm trying to say is like, just take the win, right? Like, why you can be critical, and I appreciate Marc being honest and being critical, but like a lot of people are being mean spirited, like in the comments, right? And I'm like, yo, like if this was the Olympics, he's on the podium. He made his performance not gold or silver, but he got bronze. He's on the podium, so take the win, you know. And so my thing is a lot of the Filipinos, and one of my friend David put it best. Let me put it real quick.
You know, Mitch, I while you pull that up, I just want to say it was objectively not awful.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't watch it and I wasn't cringing.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, like, the people that are saying all this stuff and they're, like, cringing, like, no, that was not the case. That's you reacting to the media stuff. And I'm sure we'll talk about it, Mitch, the whole backlash aspect. And I have a lot of thoughts on that. And I'm really on Joe's side on this.
Yeah. So my friend David, he put like, as we know, Filipinos sadly have a hard time lifting each other up. First to point out success, but last to address struggle. And again, it's just this whole like, we when someone is successful, right? We want the discounts. We want all the we want all the gimmicks. We want the first row seats. We want all of this stuff. But if this person doesn't look good, or some Filipinos be like the first to throw you out. Like, bro, like, where's the loyalty there, yo? Like, I'm not saying you gotta sugarcoat it. I'm not saying you got to like Jo Koy, you're the best ever, you know? Like, you don't have to like brown nose it literally, but like you can just be real, like, hey, you did good, you can do better type of thing, you know? All I'm saying is, like I said, like, like Filipinos, we crazy. Like we give like Haley Steinfeld, who is 1/8 Filipino, and we give her the most credit. And here we have a Filipino on a main stage, and we're not giving him more credit. Like obviously, not every Filipino. There's a lot of Filipinos out there, not just within our circles, because we know Jo Koy, or Jo Koy's mom, but there's some Filipinos out there that's just like willing to just like throw them aside. So I'll let Mark or Rachel continue.
Yeah, that is his own the brown nosing is his own toxic as well. I mean, I saw a lot of that on the build up to it, and I'm like, no, let's root for him and let's really understand the mechanics of this cultural moment versus being in this fanboy fangirl mentality. I don't like that either. I've always talked out about that with Filipinos because I feel like we still have that colonial mentality sometimes of worshiping our idols, and we should not be doing that. Joe is human, and that's why I consider myself a good Jo Koy fan, because I will look objectively at, I thought you give me a 1 to 10 on his monologue and his performance as a host. I give it probably a 5 or 6. I think it was passable. It was average,
Yeah.
it was good enough. I've seen worse.
Yeah.
I've seen white people go up there and really embarrass themselves. And, there's been so many years. And you know what? Here's another thing. There's a negativity towards the Academy Awards. It's been losing influence since the 90s.
Yeah.
So every year there's this like sense of decay and dilapidation. It's like a building that's not been maintained and it's just slowly like falling apart. And so because of that, it casts a dark cloud over anyone who hosts it. So over the years, people have said, oh, Jimmy Kimmel's not that great or whatever it is. So that's always been negative. What really upset me about this was this morning when everyone's like, worst host ever, and just being so dramatic over it. And then, like you said, some of the Filipinos jumping on that bandwagon. I'm like, it was not the worst.
It wasn't that bad. Yeah.
You
know what? And from a standpoint, I love stand-up comics. I've been watching it, and like critically, like, so some people had pointed out that he laughed at his own jokes. He could have saved himself had he not laughed at so much of his own jokes. But there were a couple times where he kind of stunted his own joke, and I'm like, no, let it ride. But I think he was just fanboying over like Robert De Niro. Like I was like, stop fawning over him. But I think he was as a fan, he was there, like he was just amazed at what he's doing. But I think I agree. I think it was a 6. I love, Mark, that you're very honest. I wish I could be a little more honest about it, but I'm trying to refrain. And I think as part of our culture too, we're kind of just polite. We try not to say anything. I try not to say anything negative. But I do have people that are critical about his performances. And I agree with everything you say, Mark. I'm glad you said it, because I just can't with Easter Sunday, with just everything. And I've watched him a couple times. I've seen him, I don't know how many times live in person, but I have like a lot of friends. Even my Samoan in-laws, they love Jo Koy too. So I have like a lot of family that just love him, and I've been watching him since like the Laugh Factory when he first started out. Like his crowd was more of like, yeah, you're right, the LA area comedy scene. So watching him develop as a comic, I was like, I see him developing. But then I see Jim. Like last night, we were noticing that there were a lot of comics. And I'm glad that they added a category about a best stand-up or something like that. And because I'm a big comedy fan. Like I love stand-up comics. I used to watch that more than any movies. So just watching it as a stand-up, as a comedy fan, I think he should be fully developed by now. That's what my feeling is. But to me, I guess maybe it's because I'm still in my own little world that I'm surprised that people don't know who Jo Koy is. And I'm like, how do you not know? You know who Dave Chappelle is. You know who, some people know who Jim Gaffigan is. Some people who know who Norm Macdonald is. But I was like, Jo Koy to me is kind of still up there. And And I put Jo Koy up there even before I knew Tita Josie. I was like, I think he's still one of the funnier ones out there. As far as his performance, I think he's just totally nervous. But you're right. I didn't realize how much the other hosts. Again, I'm not. I don't watch these shows that often, so I don't know how much time they have to prepare. But he even said like, I only had 10 days to prepare. I was like, well, is that normal or no? You guys are saying like no, it's like Jimmy Kimmel, he gets like 6 months. I was like, well, that is so unfair.
Because of the whole comedy scene, because of Hollywood, I don't think we hit the turning point where we can be funny again, right? Because people are on their tippy toes, and I think that's another aspect into what Jo Koy was doing. He was playing it safe, and to a little bit of his detriment because he was playing it safe. But I get it; that's a different crowd, right? He doesn't know how to play this crowd, right? And again, like, what are you gonna do? Like, talk about the Epstein client list? I know the other dude talked about it, and that was funny, but I don't think everyone was gonna be laughing. So again, we're doing strides. We got like a Delta employee shutting that trans activist doing the thing, right? Like, hey, like you call me the wrong pronouns, and he's like, okay, and and so like the culture is shifting, but it's not totally shifted over, right? And so and Jo Koy's playing it safe is indicative of that, right? And so he really needed to play by the middle, and so I guess that also added to his performance. And so we'll kind of like wrap it up here. Where can people find you? Go ahead, and what are your closing comments for tonight's evening?
Yeah, so Mitch, that's where I kind of feel that I feel like Jo Koy is going to be looked upon more fondly after this. The backlash is still developing. I appreciate that we're doing this like in the moment, but I think the backlash is actually going to help him because I think the public went too far to the point that they're not recognizing that you're being unnecessarily harsh to actually a minority comedian. Like, what is this with the overprotection of Taylor Swift, right? So this will be interesting to watch. And for me, you can find me on YouTube, Marc Ang, M-A-R-C, and then A-N-G is my last name. I do a lot of citizen journalism, so you just look for me there. And then I have a lot of my articles published on Google News. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Mitch.
Thanks, Marc. Go ahead, Rachel, your closing thoughts, and where can people find you?
Yeah, as I was just looking at the comments, and I do realize that personally some people were saying, oh, I heard he bombed and stuff like that. And then I'm reading comments, a couple comments and stuff, and it was a lot of, I didn't realize how negative they were. But there were people that were sticking up there like, no, he's actually a pretty good comic. I've seen his stuff for years. He's really funny, because everybody's like, who's this person anyways? And I'm getting a lot of that. And again, because I'm such a fan of comedy, I'm fully aware who he is. Like, I know who Russell Peters is, and like all these other people in comedy. But I guess if you're not following comedy, you wouldn't know who this is. But I think because of this, maybe they'll have a second look at him. I thought as a speaker, he did fairly well. Being a teacher myself, I know how hard it is to be a public speaker. People get really nervous. But I think because it's a different crowd, that's why, it's not there. They're not there for the funnies, they're there for an awards show, and to be serious and all stuffy and whatever. But as we're seeing a lot of comics just being these hosts, maybe, again, he's a safe bet, I would say. He's a safe bet, but because he's still kind of unknown to the general mainstream, maybe they'll look at him again. As far as everybody's trying to compare him to Ricky Gervais, dude, he's been doing a lot in Hollywood. Jo Koy's just a stand-up comedian. Jimmy Kimmel has his own show. He's actually had a show, the Man Show. He's been around TV. So Jo Koy, to expect him to be like TV ready and stuff like that, that's different. That's not really fair. And even Chris Rock, he was on SNL. So mind you, Jo Koy is not even TV. He was what he did an appearance once. But anyway, As far as my socials, I don't really have my socials. I have my personal socials up. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. I think I'll end off saying on a as positive as possible. Like, he didn't bomb the show. Like, I think it was very much average, if anything. And when it comes down to it, I always look at this as the most positive point, where when one win for a Filipino, it's a win for all of us. And I think this is just another leg up. He'll have other opportunities, and obviously he like Jo Koy is on the level of Netflix, right? He is up there, and this isn't anything on a low level. I think it's a learning opportunity, and just because he took it like 10 days out, I think anyone in that position would have done the same. Like, if the Daily Wire said like, "Hey Mitch, you want to jump in like a podcast?" I would like, yeah, I guess I will. I guess I can't turn that down. And so my point is, like, I'm gonna be backing up Jo Koy here in a sense where, again, he didn't have the opportunity, like the preparation here, and you know, when it comes down to it, it's a crowd, and even the culture right now, like, anything about humor is just like, you have to be on tiptoes. We haven't won the culture war where we can make fun of people again. So I think he did just an average job, and I think it's just a great way for Filipinos, really Filipino Americans, to level up. And so I'll just leave it there. Everyone, thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Mark. You can follow me on my Instagram at Hey Mitch Mitch. I'm also on Twitter, Maverick Mitch. And see you in the next video. Thank you for watching. Peace, peace, peace. Be with you.